a follow-up from last Thursday's session about the Seven Ranges survey project in Belmont County, Ohio. After our initial conversation, when you first gave me that preview peek at the link, you sent me some additional documents related to my ancestors. Quite frankly, I was going 100 miles an hour and preparing for a wedding, so I didn't have a chance to go look all of that up. Uh, this was related to some of the counties that I mentioned in my ancestors. Was that it? And had you looked it up in the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management database? Was that it?
I honestly have I don't remember what I sent you.
I guess I'll go do my own research and figure that out.
I'm guessing, were they the land patents? They might have.
I think they were agreements, documents showing. So they weren't the photos, the images. They were names on deeds, that sort of thing.
Okay. There's a vague memory, but
That's okay. That's okay. Hello, Flora from California. You may not know, but I'm right here in NorCal. I'm in Berkeley, California. Lovely to see you. We should chat. We should follow up. So I'm going to back up here for a second, Crystal, and have you tell us in your own words what that was all about. And tell us again what I call the peanut butter and chocolate moment as you and Jason had this organic start to this idea.
So Jason, who she refers to, is our county recorder, and both of us have an interest in local history, genealogy, and so forth. And I'm for a nonprofit economic development organization here in the county. I had an old diary. I guess you would call it a diary. It's like a 4-page document. It's been typed. It's been handed down, shared around family, and so forth. That was written in 1876 by my great-great-great-grandfather. And it talked about things like where the first orchard was, who had the first store, where salt was discovered, all of those kinds of things. But he always referenced it in terms of on whose land. Well, I didn't know whose land where that was. And I was curious to piece together what the county looked like back then. And so where were these businesses? Where was this industry?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I started figuring it out, charting it, and I started doing it on graph paper and pencil. And then
so it's a friends and neighbors, a fan strategy of figuring out a one-place study, essentially, where your one place was the county of Belmont. So you started out with a graph paper of places and names. And then what happened?
So I was doing that based off the Bureau of Land Management records. Walked into county recorder's office one day, in Jason's office. He said, "Hey, I'm working on this project I want to show you." He brought out paper. He was doing the exact same thing for his own interest. So luckily we had not done the same townships. So we combined forces. He did the majority of it. He was amazing. We got it all finished.
I'll interrupt there for a second because your recorder, help me again with his last name.
Jason Garzik.
Garzik. That's right, Garzik. His the site is terrific. I mean, as a genealogist looking for records, voila, there it all is. So he clearly has got his team together, got the documents all there. It looks great.
And he gets it. He understands why people are looking for these things. And so we laid it all out. We had a couple tables pushed together so we could see our pencil and paper. And then we're like, well, this is great, but it'd be nice if we could see where the creeks were, where, Zane's Trace, which became National Road, where all those things were. So we could get a better feel for it. So we contacted Anthony, our GIS director, and said, "Hey, here's where we pulled all the information. We were able to download it into an Excel format. Can you make this beautiful, digitized?" And he did. And he color coded it so you could really take one glance and you could see by the color codings by date, and you could see where people settled. And so it was right then it was beyond our wildest imagination. And then in Thursday's interview, he talked about what inspired him then he'd already started extending that a bit into other counties, but then decided, okay, I'm going to do the entire 7 ranges. So That's been phenomenal. So I've had people email or send me messages that they were able to find their relatives in other counties, and how exciting that has been. So I'm curious to hear from people, if they've used the map yet, if what they found useful, what they would love to try to do, or what they would enjoy seeing, because this has been such an organic process and we learn as we go and we think, oh, wouldn't this be cool if we could do this, or can we see that? And Anthony's been able to make it happen. So it's been a fun, and it's been such an amazing educational tool for us as we learned about our own place.
I'm just pasting the link back into the live chat we've got here to make sure that people can see it. They don't auto link from the display, but you can copy that link out if you're anywhere near that. You know, I love in the talk that will appear right there at projectkin.org, for projectkin.substack.com. Anthony has this wonderful moment where he says, anybody in GIS loves data. Bring them data. And I just have to laugh because it was always, I've always had a role as a product manager where I'd be sitting there begging an engineer to say, this would be so cool if you do it. My customers so want to see this happen. And so you go in and you have to, engineers are like magicians. They have this ability to create anything. And because they can create anything, they have to be motivated to create the thing that's going to make the difference. And that was just such a delight to see. And, you went to him and said, data, value. He said, okay, I could see using that. And then his story about his daughter.
Yeah.
Would you retell that story too? I love that.
So his daughter was taking a summer program up at Fort Steuben in Steubenville, and where they do a lot of history, they do some archaeology and so forth, and they must have been learning about the Seven Ranges. And I know Anthony took a sample of the map up to them, to the staff, and said, this is what we've done. And somebody there said, it'd be so cool if the entire Seven Ranges, if you could do the entire Seven Ranges. So that's what's sparked it. Again, it's been completely organic, and seeing how people could use, what would.
Motivated one by family historians, real people looking at their own families, not even professionals, just, hey, two is a 12-year-old girl. Dad, I'd love this. This would be so interesting, so cool. There's that word again. It's as I've had, as I mentioned before we got started, a professional in, not as a surveyor, but as working in the research of deeds and whatnot in Ohio, reach out to me since the talk. How, I know you don't have an office of this is how we did it, come ask us, but what would be the best way for people in other counties to contact you? And if they are able to tickle the fancy of their GIS director, how do they put it together? How could they find out how you did this?
I think, show them the final result of the map. Show them what Anthony was able to do. And then have them contact Anthony. I mean, his office, he has a webpage and so forth.
I'll put that in the notes.
Okay, perfect. And I'm sure, he would love to help or expand it, help show people how to do it. And that's and that's the computer stuff that I don't understand. That's not me. No clue. Remember, I started with a pencil and graph paper. But that's what it takes.
Right.
And if you can start piecing together stories that have been passed down, it helps you understand your place better. It has shed so much light on things, stories, why things are the way they are. It's been really, and getting the kids involved. That's how much better can that be?
Right. At the end of the day, we're doing this for future generations. We're pulling from past generations to get the stories in place to make it a little easier for the next generations to step through that scaffolding and better understand their place in this part of this history. Which reminds me, I mean, Eastern Ohio, you particularly in Belmont County, and the whole Seven Ranges, was this first region to be surveyed precisely because it was the new Northwest Territory. It was the easternmost. It was the front door. And so many migrations of American history moved through there. In my case, my family was largely Quaker, coming from the Northwest, from North Carolina, and then through, and then they went down the river
Yeah.
from Steubenville, I guess. Rented a couple of boats and hightailed it on south and ended up in Cincinnati or that region.
Sure.
And, tell us a little bit about that history and what kinds of family stories are seen there.
Oh, um, so many stories. Let me tell you about one that I've been reading recently. It was about a man named Ambrose Danford,
Hmm.
and he came to the area, what's became Belmont County, but 1797, I believe. He came with two older brothers. And I've heard that two different stories. One said he was 13, one said he was 11, but he was still a child. Uh, his family had been living in Washington, Pennsylvania, so just across.
The river.
Today, you're there in 45 minutes, from half hour, 45 minutes, depending on where you are in the counties. So back then, he and his brothers came along what's known as Captina Creek. Today, Captina Creek is important in Ohio. It's still one of the cleanest in the state, which is pretty cool. And the brothers, they found a plot of land, they settled, they built a cabin, and then they left young Ambrose there and went back to Pennsylvania to get the rest of the family. They were gone for weeks. And can you just imagine leaving a child in the woods in this new frontier for weeks, and then brought the family? So it's those
Mom never would have done that. And then we're like, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. You'll get over it.
Yeah.
Don't be such a wuss.
Right. So that's a good story.
Wow.
The first
Talk about growing up fast.
Oh yeah. And then there are a lot of stories. We find the prominent people, like with the last names that we've heard in history, like Lee.
James Ross, and yeah.
So Arthur Lee was here, or I don't find any evidence that he actually lived here, but he owned property. He was one of the first purchasers. Two of his brothers signed the Declaration of Independence. So, and then a cousin later was Robert E. Lee for the South.
Right.
So you had that. The first man to open a store in 1801 was a man by the name of James Caldwell, and became very prominent. He was a banker, which I found a lot of prominent men back then in that they had ties to a bank or they became bankers. I found that interesting. But James Caldwell died, I want to say 1831, if my memory serves. Don't quote me on that one. But I found his will because he died in Wheeling, Virginia. So he went back to Wheeling and found his will online, where he left money for a son who was at Yale Law School. He did not leave any more money for two sons who had gone on to St. Louis to start businesses. And yeah, but he left money to his housekeeper. He left the farm down along Captina Creek to his housekeeper and her son.
Housekeeper?
Uh-huh.
Oh, and her son.
Yeah. And her son, but if she was to remain single, this farm was hers. If she married, the farm would go to the son. And then I discovered later that the son used Caldwell as a last name. So we can surmise, we can guess.
Housekeeping.
Yeah, exactly. But I found it interesting that this Alexander Holtz Caldwell, the son, um, ended up marrying Nancy Danford, Ambrose Danford's daughter. So you had this, you had such a mix of high society and frontier and the pioneers, and you can there were so few people back then in the area. The webs get very complicated very quickly, and
Yeah.
I think you quickly discover that you're connected.
Yeah.
If you're curious enough to keep digging, there are connections.
Yeah.
And I think it teaches us, I hope it teaches us more compassion,
Yeah.
because we're all in this together, and we're probably related.
We were in this together. We all are in this together. We're in this together because, your people helped my people. And in
That's
fact, your people are my people.
right.
Yeah, no, it's like looking at, uh, you know, it was generally men, both because of technology and biology, that were fighting in wars. But you see in, the late 18th century, if you were 14, 15, 16 years old in 1768, then chances were you had somebody that did something during that war. Um, and then all of a sudden you have, if somebody somewhere, and it often wasn't until the 19th century, the early 19th century, before they were claiming the veterans' rights to then go in and try to claim some land or claim a pension or something like that, that you start to see the written stories about what they did in the war, which is often and really hard to understand writing. I was looking at the one from an ancestor who, like I said, went down the Ohio River over to Cincinnati. And it sounds like the old man had dementia or something by the time they tried to claim the pension. And there's like a child or a grandchild that actually is trying to write the story of how this, what he did. And it was like the story of, like, I was there and then this happened and then that happened. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the same thing with these, the kid who was left alone. Where's
Right.
his story, man? What? Did they leave food? Oh, those weren't MRIs, or MREs, whatever.
Right. Right.
He wasn't taking a
Yeah.
Pop-Tarts and sticking them in a toaster oven.
No, I
Uh,
think I read one story where, they left him some food and a gun so he could hunt, and, so he could,
a little
yeah,
beef
but
jerky. I mean, what do you do? And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
It's amazing what and I read a quote recently, and I forget who said it, but with every convenience, knowledge is lost. And if you think about that, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to survive like they did. With every
yeah.
convenience, knowledge is lost. And boy, is that powerful, especially when you start looking back at some of these stories and what they did to survive. And it's really powerful, I think.
Well,
And,
it's one
there
thing to go make, sourdough bread, but damn, AI, forgetting how to write.
exactly.
The internet, how to use a card catalog.
Yep. The microwave, how to cook, right? I mean, stores, you forget how to go. How many of us don't know, couldn't grow a garden if, you know, it's
So,
really basic things, but
by golly, I can put in a zipper. I don't even know how to put
there
in a
you go.
buttonhole.
There you go. And then there were people we found, like William Dewar. I discovered he owned land up in Jefferson County and Belmont County. And you'll have to, if anybody's interested in him, there's a Forbes magazine article, a great one about him. I mean, he was quite the scoundrel running a Ponzi scheme, so we had that back then too. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Plus, you
It,
had a lot of land speculators. Buy it up. I'm next door.
yep,
Buy it up. See what happens. Sell it high.
yep.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to compare, and maybe someday we'll figure out how to do this, to compare the census records with the landowners' names and to see how many actually lived here or how many were still back in Virginia or Pennsylvania.
AI would be really good at that, right? Because that's just data, and the data is increasingly digitized and available and structured.
Yeah.
So it should be a really good thing for AI to be able to do.
Yeah. And I think,
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, it'll be, I think Anthony and I talked about that a bit. So I don't know. We'll see if we are able to figure that out or.
I mean, I'm here sitting, I'm thinking, what do we need to do to convince more counties to join in on this consortium of getting this done, or get somebody like Family Search who has, a dog in that fight, who has an interest in taking this to the next, pardon the expression, to the next level. Because
Yeah.
Family Search, integrating the Family Search data as you have, and again, you guys are not, if I may say, experts on user interface and application design and all of that stuff. And yet, in a matter of weeks, we had this incredible tool that Anthony was able to create that's incredibly powerful to pull this view in, and snapped his fingers and poof, pulled in the Family Search data. Other well-structured APIs, that's a development term, and it essentially means hooks. They have a big database, they put hooks, we have Velcro, let's put them together, boom, it works. So as we get creative about other ways that we'd like to see data work together, I don't know, maybe census data, but in that case, it sounds like, look at the two databases and come tell me something. That's an analytical step to do on top of that. I would just love to see a consortium that encourages and shows other counties the value to genealogical interest, historical interest, community interest, and, as you point out, historical empathy and community empathy, to bring that together to get more historical places to look at that. There is, can we say, no place on the planet that wouldn't benefit from a view that way? Because if you can look at records on the basis of place, that's all it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Looking at records on the basis of place, and then people on the basis of records on the basis of place. Boom! You now have information, and you can look at it with maps, which is just a different way of looking at data.
It gives you more context about the people you're studying.
Exactly.
Or you're researching, and you will quickly discover we've talked the connections. I mean, and it can create so much, it helps build so much curiosity, I think, because the more you get into it, the more, well, what about this person, or what, I mean, the rabbit holes that you could go down are just astounding. In fact, I go down several. It's hard for me to stay focused on this project because I end up going down so many rabbit holes, researching people, or could we do this, or could we do that? How can we get more people and counties involved? I don't know. I think tagging those, like you're doing, I think it's powerful. Just telling the story and getting other people involved, or getting them excited. And as an economic developer, I see the power of tourism. I see the power of the communities I've worked with. So much of them, I asked them recently, what do they want their kids, their children and grandchildren to feel about their community in the year 2050? And they want their kids and grandkids to feel safe and proud. Those are the two things that every community or every community I've worked with has said. And talk about, helps build that sense of community. This helps build that pride, because I think I think it could be so powerful. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what is it that makes you feel proud of a community? Well, it's a beautiful place. Okay.
Yeah.
That might make you feel privileged. What makes you feel proud? Well,
Right.
probably proud comes from having done something with intentionality.
Right.
And when you can reach all the way back into history for who it is that did things with intentionality in a community, now you're taking the strength of the whole community, not just my people, but not just me, but an intentionality to a whole community is really,
What did
I
they
love that.
what did they overcome?
Yeah.
So much in our area, so much of what I hear in these communities, if I take a group of high school students down walking through downtown, they were, their heads were down, their shoulders were slumped, and I'm like, "Tell me about your community. You know, what do you feel? What do you see?" And they said, "People make fun of us. People look down at us. We used to have," and they start naming a bowling alley, a movie theater, and all these things. I'm like, all those things were gone before these kids were alive, but they're repeating stories. Let's give them some good stories. Let's give them the story of resilience instead of what we used to have. But what do we still have? What did we build? And I said, okay. And then it becomes the power of words, the power of stories again. Okay, we're telling them the stories of, you know, we lost this business, we lost that business. But our relatives, our ancestors built this county. We can rebuild it. I said, so what if you tell yourself we're reinventing your town? Those kids stood up straighter just with that switching word. I mean, it still gives me goosebumps to remember that day with those kids because it hit home so hard that we're teaching them whether or not to be resilient or to be a victim by the stories we're telling in our community.
Stories teach us every day. And the problem is when you're vulnerable to the stories of politicians, you're going to pick up on the story that says, our town lost everything. Vote for me and we'll get it back. Well, okay, fine. But that story, yeah, leaves you some shoulders and I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
When in fact, you're feeling bad about an economic change that made a bowling alley, which we, by the way, just lost one, no longer feasible.
Right.
Okay. That's because you know what? It's a really high labor business.
Right.
And so understand how the economics of that business work and what can we do today
That's right.
that would have that yaya. In fact, let's make this place where it was invented. I still remember that my hometown is where windsurfing was invented. Why? Well, just the right guy. He was a skateboarder, and it's like one thing led to another.
Right.
And it's that kind of connection. And that 14-year-old, or what was he, 12, 11, 14? That
There.
adolescent kid who was left by, what was it, his brothers, his uncles, out in the middle of the forest. Figure it out.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And think about, so we don't remember or we don't talk about that history. We don't talk about the first orchard, the first corn cracker mill the first blacksmith. Those were entrepreneurs that built this.
I don't Michael Pollan, whom you may know as an author, lives in Berkeley, just saying. But in his book, The Anatomy, what's it called again? I'll think of it. But he talks about Johnny Appleseed. And as here is a plant that took advantage of humans. And is the argument. I mean, it's a plant that evolved to have its seeds distributed because every apple does not produce another apple that looks exactly like that apple. It's just in the nature of apples. And so Johnny Appleseed famously was, spreading apple trees all over the country. That's not actually what was happening. He was an entrepreneur selling the ability to make Applejack. He actually did nothing about making Applejack. He just sold the seeds, which is actually a brilliant business because the little seeds, tiny, tiny thing. It's light. You can carry it and you can, you sell on a story. Great promise of getting drunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
What an American dream. But it is that entrepreneurship. It is that resilience. It is that creativity that is sort of a signature we use it as a signature for Americans, when in fact it's a signature of human beings in the face of
Right.
survival,
Right.
having to get creative and get out of that scary place of, bears and tigers and, well,
Yeah.
maybe not tigers, coyotes and other scary things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And when I was in the UK, I mean, the rural towns there, that entrepreneurship, they got creative, how they have built new industries. I mean, industries change. That's just a part of how we, so, the world,
yeah.
but when we get stuck in
With every
the names.
convenience, it's
Yeah.
the reverse, right? With every convenience, knowledge is lost. But I would also say, with every let's see, there's got to be a corollary here. With every convenience, or rather, well, every problem creates, it sparks a solution. That's really where that's
Yeah.
going. It's the opposite of that. You have nothing but a microwave. Well, what are you going to do? Start a
Right.
fire, of course. Well, it's absolutely been lovely. Thank you so much for doing this, Crystal. I
Absolutely.
really appreciate it. And I think pardon the expression, crystallizes the larger idea. You've never heard that before, right?
Oh, never.
The larger idea of where this can go. And I think all of you listening out there will share with me the joy of what we've learned here and where we can go with this approach and what we can take. I look forward to more of these kinds of projects as we look ahead to pulling these together. So keep us posted. I hope through
Thank
your
you.
Substack, and I, as Projectkin, would be delighted to participate in any other kind of nudges and encouragements that I might offer. And I certainly have. I have family in this fight. I have stories that want to be told. I want to know where my people were and what they did, and I'm in it to get that excitement too. So thank you so much.
Thank
So
you,
all of
Barbara.
you paying attention here, what I do is I take notes from what this is. I'll let this video go out just as soon as it's ready, but I'll be filling it in with more details and references and links, and update the links. So if there's nothing in there when you first watch this video, do a refresh half hour or so later, and we'll see if I haven't gotten it up there for you. And lovely to meet all of you. Welcome, welcome. Nice to meet you. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the discussion. Till
Thank
then,
you.
thanks a lot. Bye bye now.